Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo.
When I read the story, he comes across to me as being the kind of person I would like to meet. I would feel that I would not feel inferior in his presence. You know what I mean? It would be that it wouldn't be an implied put down to be around him, because he was the kind of guy who could humble himself, had a real humility, and could undergo this baptism by John.
Joining Father Bacik in today's Reflections is Sister Geraldine Nowak, pastoral associate at St. Ignatius Parish. Today, Father Bacik and Sister Geraldine will be discussing Jesus as Liberator. Now, here's Father Bacik.
Geraldine, you and I have had the chance to talk seriously in the past about spiritual matters, what the gospel is all about, and I've always found those to be intriguing. I like a lot of the slants that you bring to the spiritual life and the way you perceive the call of the Lord. I find a real freshness in what you have to say, and you've given me a lot of good ideas for stuff that I've said and written. And so with that in mind, I've been wanting to have you come on my radio program and to do this in public. Now, it's a little harder to do it in public than it is sitting privately talking about such things, but how about giving it a try?
Good, let's go.
That's what I like, confidence, right?
Right.
I want to talk about Jesus Christ in relationship to liberation. That's become a popular theme these days. Jesus Christ, the Liberator. And I want to do it by looking at the Gospels and trying to reread the Gospels from the viewpoint of the poor. And I want to do it this way. I'm trying to imagine myself in the crawling behind the eyes of a woman on welfare, living today in our own society, a woman struggling in many ways, who finds the system to be demeaning, wonders about whether she's going to be able to feed her children at the end of the month on the food stamps she receives, a woman who is often feels the injustice of the system in which she lives, a woman who's not really starving to death, but is sort of always on the edge of anxiety about whether she can provide for herself and her family or not. She's classed among those who are poor in our society, and she knows certain struggles that middle-class people, I suppose, never know. So I'm trying to draw now on the people that I've talked to in that kind of situation and try ask myself, well, if they read the gospel, if this woman read through the Gospels, what would strike her? And what would she see about Jesus? Which stories would jump out at her, and so on. So what I want to do is tell you what some of those are, and then after I hit them, let's just say what it might mean to us in terms of liberation, or what we're learning from the woman in her reading of the Scriptures, okay? So, I'm trying to crawl behind her eyes now, and to see it in this way, and to sort of speak what I think she might be saying, okay? The big thing that strikes me about is that Jesus is really one of us poor and dispossessed people. I feel sort of an immediate kinship with him as I read through the Gospels. He knew what it was like to live in an occupied country under the Romans. Always the fear and watching what you say. You know, he had a sense of being the alien and the outcast himself. He knew what it was like to be from Galilee, you know, to have the people from Judea sort of look down upon him and kid him about his accent and so on. That business where the Galileans are recognized by their accent, that sort of struck me. You know, it made them the outcasts of the aliens. It let the people in Jerusalem and Judea feel superior in relationship to them. I love to kid them about that sort of thing. There's a passage in there that struck me about what it was like. He didn't have any place to lay his head at night. Oh, that's a striking thing about Jesus. No place that says to lay his head. That sentence just sort of jumps out at me. The fact that I get the impression that he was not educated. He wasn't among the educated class there. That probably was a hardship in some ways. that's another point that would come across me. I guess he had a job, which I suppose he didn't get rich on at all, and he ends up quitting it. That was interesting to me. He had a job as a carpenter, and here he must quit his job, and then he goes around being this itinerant preacher. So when I'm reading the Gospels, these are the things that they're saying, that he's one of us. I have the feeling that if I could walk up to Jesus and talk to him and tell him about standing in a welfare line, he would understand me. You know, he would know what I feel at the end of the month when I can't feed my children. I think he would know what it means to be put down, to feel like here's one of those people who's too lazy and shiftless to work and so on. I think that when I would tell Jesus about that, he would understand. Well, Geraldine, I'm going to stop there and just, sort of a thumbnail sketch of what I think might jump out at the woman. More about a mood about Jesus. Maybe it's a personality analysis almost. It's like, here's a guy who knew what it was like to live on the other side of the tracks, and therefore I could identify with him.
If I were the woman on welfare, I would probably know that in a real way if I had the opportunity to go to some experience where people were that Christ for me. I'm thinking again of an experience I had out east in having the privilege to work in a soup kitchen. We were concerned with food, clothing, and shelter, and met many women like this and children, and their response would be one that they knew of this Christ by coming to this place because the people who ministered there were like that Christ, understood that situation. So from the viewpoint of the woman, I guess it would add a little hope to my day. I would know that there is a place to go and that there are real people who embody that Christ that I may have heard about in my childhood, or I may have heard about on a radio station. The woman, myself being the woman on welfare, if I were that woman, I don't know that I would have heard that so directly as being preached or read. I probably have that, I know that more by way of an experience. The people who are kind to me, the people who really maybe, the person who maybe went with me to get some food stamps, went with me to look for a place to live, or the person that met me and offered me that place to stay at night because somehow they had an inkling of what that would be like with no place to stay.
I think that's a really good observation, and it relates to the way we generally think about the Christian message, don't we? That Christ is made present to our world through his followers. I mean, Jesus walked the earth at one time, a tiny segment of that earth for a short period of time, but he doesn't do that in the same way anymore. What is that line? We now have become the hands and feet of Jesus, that it's up to the followers to embody that kind of message. And I fully agree with you that just to hear the Scriptures or to hear about even Jesus the Liberator has little meaning apart from practice, about seeing it in actuality. The liberation theologians like to talk about orthopraxis rather than orthodoxy. We often talk about orthodoxy, that is, you have right views, right doctrines, right teachings in conformity with Christianity, but they talk about orthopraxis, by which they mean right kind of action, right kind of practical living out of the gospel behavior, which really mirrors the message of Jesus, of having put on the mind of Jesus and thus being able to see the outcast, being able to see the suffering in one's life. So I think you've made it very graphic and real to me in terms of, if the woman walked into a soup kitchen and it was run by Christian people and they treated her not like people at the welfare office, I shouldn't be saying I shouldn't put down people there, because the Christian people could be right there and treat the woman with dignity. Let's say it this way, that if she runs into people who don't treat her with dignity, she would have a marked contrast and be able to say, well, geez, this person really does care about me. They don't treat me like trash. Maybe she goes and visits the teacher of her youngster, and the teacher is extremely respectful to her and recognizes the difficulties involved in raising the children and treats her as a human being. Then she comes to know in a concrete way what all this talk about Jesus the Liberator might be.
And on another side to that would be if, let's say, the lady encounters the people who, in a sense, are living out the Christ message. The people meeting the woman on welfare, what that woman brings as a gift also in terms of getting to know Christ as the poor, it becomes a very living example, and that person presents the gift, this woman on welfare, or I think of some of the women that I have met, what they meant to me in presenting another aspect of Christ, that while maybe what is that like to not have a place and how that woman really copes with it. Certainly there's a lot more simplicity about her life. It might be survival, but it also offers me, let's say, the perspective to think about the simplicity, maybe the essentials, and maybe how far I have gotten off the track with various other things. So it's kind of a mutual thing. The woman on welfare is finding the Christ in the people where she would go, where they're embodying Christ, and then what a gift it is to run into people, and what great meaning they have to offer to our lives, to give us perspective and balance.
I'm thinking of Mother Teresa in that regard, who said that we would only know in heaven how much we receive from the dispossessed of this world. That she always insisted that it was not a matter of sympathy for these people, but of real compassion, where one suffered with them and no doubt would learn from them, and would learn something about who Christ really was. So I like that turnaround that you've made there. Let me move on, Geraldine, and say something else as she's paging through her Gospels now. I'm trying to crawl behind her eyes again and see what jumps out at her. And this time she notices the baptism by John. Jesus comes there, and she sees him walking tall with a sense of self-esteem. She thinks, here's a man not beaten down by his situation. He's living in an occupied country. He's from the part of the country that's sort of despised. But the man remains strong, and he walks up to where John is baptized, and there's something special about him. He has charisma. He has power, great self-confidence inside of him. Yet, on the other hand, he's not arrogant. He's humble. It's the arrogant person that really turns me off. It's the arrogant person that makes me feel inferior. I always wonder, what do they have, or who do they think they are to treat me like that? But Jesus is humble. And what strikes me about the story is that he humbles himself to be baptized. John has a problem with it. He thinks he shouldn't be baptizing Jesus, but Jesus insists. My sense is it took a big person to do that. Somehow, just to watch this would give those of us who are down and out and living on the margins of society some sort of hope. The system didn't beat him down, and yet he found a way to be humble and not arrogant. Though he had confidence, he was able to submit himself to this baptism by John. When I read the story, he comes across to me as being the kind of person I would like to meet. I would feel that I would not feel inferior in his presence. You know what I mean? It would be that it wouldn't be an implied put down to be around him, because he was the kind of guy who could humble himself, had a real humility, and could undergo this baptism by John. Well, Geraldine, why don't we see what we can do with that, if that suggests any ideas to us about what Christ is like, or what it means to encounter him today, maybe what the virtue of humility is really about for us. No, maybe just talk about it from the viewpoint of the clergy, or maybe from your viewpoint as a sister, that maybe that we would have to be careful because we have certain privileged positions in a way, not to lord it over. Somehow I'm flashing on what Jesus said to all the leaders, the pastoral ministers, I guess, implied that we are servants of the people and not to be lording over it. I mean, that's just one thing that strikes me.
What I think of most is how important hospitality is, and how important that is for families to offer that one to another, how important that is for church people, how important it is to feel at home. I heard a speaker that the diocese had brought in say something like, if we are not at home in the homes that we are living, then we are homeless. That was a rather powerful statement. When we meet one another, if we do not feel at home with the people that we meet, what does that really say about us in terms of just human beings one to another, not even considering the Christ message of that or the arrogance, just thinking about the arrogance and let's say the high regard I have for, let's say, people who are in positions, church leaders, bishops, who can be one with people, can just relate so easily, and the comment is so often made, well, they're just so homey and they're so easy to be with. I guess, again, the concept of hospitality and from, again, the point of view of the woman on welfare, maybe how many times that was not an experience in her life. And maybe, you know, the simplicity of it all, it really isn't that difficult to be hospitable.
I like that image, and being at home, I suppose one of the hard experiences in life is to feel homeless, to feel as though one does not belong. And maybe it doesn't take a whole lot to create that kind of feeling. I think sometimes when you walk into a room, you ever notice you might feel alien, strange, you don't belong, uncomfortable, nervous and all that. And if somebody will just stand up and come over and say hello or give you a smile or say come on and sit down and talk with me or something, it seems like it lightens the whole situation. I suppose in some simple way like that, we make a home in a way. We make people feel at home. I suppose our liturgies are very important that way. We would like to create a welcoming attitude at the celebration of the Eucharist. The ushers are important that way, making people feel welcome. One of the important things about that would be that there's equality in the liturgy. There's not a distinction anymore between rich and poor, between those with power and the powerless in our society. The liturgy breaks down that distinction. Everyone's the same there. Everyone's hearing the same message. Everyone is receiving the same Lord. And that's the way the sign should be. Unfortunately, I suppose even in churches, sometimes this class distinction comes across. Maybe it's put forward by the clergy who assume certain arrogant attitude. Maybe it's put forth by some people in the congregation who are not as warm and welcoming as they might be. So I think of the liturgy as being a place where that hospitality could happen. And to pick up on another point, he said, I think our bishop, both Bishops Huffman and Donnelly, are good at that. They're down to earth. People say that about them, don't they? They're approachable. You can talk to them. They're earthy kind of people in a way, real people. You hear that a lot. I think that's a high compliment for them. And it helps maybe to create a sense that the diocesan church is this sort of warm or welcoming community.
And I found that in other churches as well. Possibly we're all realizing once again, you know, the importance of that basic concept of feeling comfortable, feeling at home. I think of some experiences I've had in with mixed denominations, and again the comfortability there. And it usually happened because someone was willing to just be themselves and to be comfortable and to extend that friendly hand or that smile or the cup of coffee and the come on in and sit down and how are you. So it's I guess, you know, in thinking of arrogance, I can't help but think of the necessity for hospitality and how all the great things that come from that can happen. Just people to one another, and again, how that, I guess when I think about Christ, I think that, you know, that's one of the great things that he offered to people, and what was behind that hospitality was acceptance, the acceptance of all peoples.
I think that you've put the arrogance together properly with hospitality. It's a way, I think, of sharpening that whole point. Geraldine, let me go on and try some other ones here about what the woman on welfare is noticing as she reads the scriptures. One of the things is as she's paging through, she gets to the first sermon, and it jumps out at her. Repent, change your lives, for the reign of God is at hand. That whole notion of the reign of God is sort of a thrilling one. It brings to mind a whole flood of images. a new beginning, an end to this lousy life that I've been going through. Makes me dream of a better world where people, rich and poor, men and women, would live in peace and harmony. The woman thinks she could read those parables all day long about the kingdom, the reign of God, because it suggests to her a whole new way of living. It makes her feel hopeful inside. And I suppose as she's going through, she has a favorite one is where he identifies himself with the poor. When Jesus says that when you help the hungry, the outcast, the thirsty, the homeless, the imprisoned, that you're really helping him. Matthew 25 jumps out at her as she's reading along with these sermons of Jesus and these parables that he tells. And she sort of immediately knows what he is saying. He is saying something about that he's in the least of the brothers and sisters, that he's in all of these poor and marginalized. What it's really telling her is she's important. Christ is in her. She has an inner dignity and so on. And she identifies with that story very much. It becomes probably one of the most important stories, Matthew 25, in the whole thing. And she thinks a little bit about how other people might read that. What do they say when they catch that story, and where it says, you're going to be condemned because you didn't help the people who were homeless and hungry and thirsty. And they don't even know that they were doing it. I say, Lord, when did we miss this? How did we fail to see you? And he says, well, then you failed to do it to the least of my brothers or sisters. You failed to do it to me. So this Matthew 25 becomes one of her favorite gospel stories, I think. Well, what do we want to get out of that? Maybe the message is real obvious, huh? Or anything special strike you about it? It seems to me that there's the great emphasis these days on liberation theology is helpful in hearing that story. But one way in which it might need to be extended is the need to attack structures and systems, that very often it is the systemic evil, the institution itself, the way the society is set up, the way the economy runs, that causes the problem in the first place. That this is why many people would end up being in the situation of the woman on welfare. So that charity in this regard wouldn't be just giving the loaf of bread to the one hungry now, but trying in some way to set up a system where this woman could get a job. That might be one of the responses. What she needs is not a handout, but a way out, as we say in our campaign for human development. So it puts our mind maybe on the systems and structures and not just on the personal charity. Do you want to comment on that, or you want me to go on to another passage here I think is going to jump out at her?
Let's go on to another passage.
Okay, I'm on Luke 4 that I think would hit her. This is the one where Jesus is in the synagogue in Nazareth on a Sabbath, and he stands up to do the reading, and he quotes Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. The Spirit is to bring glad tidings to the poor, to proclaim liberty to the captives, to announce a year of favor from the Lord. And then Jesus sits down and says, this day, this passage is fulfilled in your hearing. The woman surely has to get this. This is where we get to the theme of Jesus Christ, the Liberator, the one who's come to free the captives. It presents a whole other side of Jesus that is often lost sight of. So much of the personal piety, Geraldine, is in terms of, well, have you accepted Jesus as your personal Savior? I often like to say in that context, have you accepted Jesus Christ as Liberator of captives? Do you read Luke 4 seriously or not? I think the woman would just love this. I think this becomes her favorite image of Jesus, the one who comes to free people, so that she would feel not imprisoned in her poverty, imprisoned in her situation, but that she would have a sense that indeed there's new life possible for her.
And again, that would be real by the people that would be helpful to me and could help me along with that new life, helping me find a place to live, helping me... maybe those people that we referred to just a little bit earlier that are working in those structures and those systems that will make a difference. That for my children, I know sometimes people think that the cycle repeats itself, and true, maybe they may not have the same advantages, but possibly through these people and the systems and the things that are being done, I get glimpses of a liberation.
Mm-hmm. Maybe the next generation doesn't have to be encased in this circle of poverty, right?
Right.
I'm sure that the people who are in that situation are always longing for that, for their youngsters, for hoping new opportunities. Maybe the world of education is so important to them for that reason. Well, a way out, a way to build a new life for the next generation at least. No, I was thinking, Geraldine, of another thing that surely would grab her, and maybe paradoxically, but this is the time now she's reading